The first sign that my Tuesday was about to go sideways wasn't the email. It was the parking spot. Somebody had already coned off my parking spot. Level 2, slot 14, the one with my name on a little brass plate I'd earned after my 3rd year. There was a plastic orange cone sitting square in the middle of it at 8:04 in the morning, and a facilities guy pretending very hard to be busy near the elevator so he wouldn't have to look at me. That's when I knew. You don't cone off a person's parking spot for a promotion. You cone it off for a burial. So I parked in Visitor, grabbed my coffee, rode the elevator up to 29 and watched my own reflection in the brushed steel doors, calm as a lake, while my stomach did something I hadn't felt since my divorce. That little cold drop, the one that tells you the room already knows something you don't. The email hit my phone before the doors even opened. Sender, People Operations, subject line, all caps, touch base, 9 o'clock, RM Denali. No body, no hope you're well, no agenda attached. Just a summons dressed up in a friendly little corporate word like touch base, which is the same word they use right before they tell you your role has been sunset. I've been in enterprise software for 16 years. I know what a 9 a.m. no agenda touch base in a windowless room is. It's an execution with a calendar invite. Now, before I take you into that room, let me set the table, because the timing here matters. My name is Sloan Merrick, and at the time of this story, I was the Chief Revenue Officer at a company called Halden Cloud. 11 straight quarters over target, not near target, over. I'd personally dragged the Bergstrom contract across the finish line 6 weeks earlier, a 4-year enterprise deal worth $31 million that our own board had privately called unclosable. I closed it from a hospital waiting room while my father was in surgery, on a conference call I took standing in a stairwell so the beeping monitors wouldn't leak through. That deal alone had bumped our valuation enough to keep the whole executive floor in their lease-financed German sedans for another 2 years. And now I was being ghost-invited to room Denali like I'd been caught stealing pens. But here's the thing they didn't know I knew. My bonus vested Wednesday. $4 million tied to the Bergstrom close, fully earned, contractually locked, with 1 day left on the clock. 1 day. And somebody upstairs had done the math and decided that firing me on Tuesday was cheaper than paying me on Wednesday. Cute. Almost cute, if it hadn't been so lazy. Because 18 months earlier, sick with the flu and running a fever of 101, I'd sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning renegotiating my own contract with our then general counsel over email, and I'd slipped 4 sentences into a section nobody ever reads. Section 14, subsection D. My kids, I mean my 2 junior reps, I didn't have actual kids, used to joke that I read contracts the way other people read horoscopes, line by line, looking for the part about me. So I'd written myself a little insurance policy and buried it on page 9, and everybody who mattered had initialed it without blinking because it was 2 lines above the parking allowance, and who reads that far? I called it the tripwire, and that Tuesday morning, walking toward room Denali with a lukewarm oat milk latte and a leather folio under my arm, I already knew somebody was about to step right on it. If you're the kind of person who enjoys watching arrogance write checks that its own signature can't cash, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like while you're at it. It genuinely does keep these stories coming. And trust me, you are going to want to be here when the number they thought was 4 million turns into something a whole lot uglier. Stick around. I took the long way to Denali, not out of nerves, out of habit. 16 years teaches you that the walk to your own firing is the last free intel you'll ever get, so you use it. I passed the sales bullpen and watched a kid I'd hired myself suddenly become extremely interested in his monitor. I passed the glass wall of the marketing pod, and 3 heads turned away in unison, like a school of fish. Somebody had talked. Somebody always talks. By the time I reached the frosted door of Denali, I'd counted at least 6 people who couldn't hold my eyes, and I knew this wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a schedule. I stopped 1 door short. My office. I stepped in, set my coffee down, and unlocked the bottom left drawer with the little key I kept on my badge lanyard. Inside, in a plain manila folder that said nothing on the tab, was my contract. 9 pages. I flipped to page 9, ran my thumb down to subsection D, and read it one more time the way you'd check that your parachute cord is still attached before you jump. In the event of termination without documented cause within 30 days of any scheduled equity or bonus vesting event, accelerated payout shall be triggered at 2 times the affected amount, plus continuation of the vesting schedule, plus the employee's sole and exclusive right to elect arbitration or waive it, 2 times, not the 4 million, 8, plus continuation, plus my choice on where we fight about it. 3 sets of initials sat in the margin. Mine, the old general counsel's, and a third pair, small and rushed, belonging to a man named Trent Kessler, who at the time had been VP of Finance, and who was now the CEO of Halden Cloud, and who was, I'd have bet my house on it, the reason there was a cone in my parking spot. I folded the contract, slid it into my folio next to a few other pages I'd printed the night before, call it a hunch, and closed the drawer. Then I looked at myself once in the little mirror on the back of my office door, fixed one strand of hair that didn't need fixing, and walked out to meet the firing squad. Room Denali had the blinds down. That was the first tell. The second was that there were no laptops on the table, no water pitcher, no printed deck, no pretense of an actual conversation. Just Marcy Pell from People Operations sitting very straight with her hands folded on top of a single sheet of paper, and beside her a younger HR rep I didn't recognize who looked like he'd rather be having a root canal. No Trent. Of course no Trent. Men like Trent never come to the room. They send Marcy. "Sloan," Marcy said, doing the thing with her mouth that she thinks is a warm smile, but is really just her showing you her teeth in a controlled way. "Thanks so much for making time on short notice." "Always happy to make time for the team," I said, and I didn't sit down. She gestured at the chair. I stayed standing. There's a small power in refusing the chair. They have a script, and the script assumes you're seated and shrinking, and when you don't shrink, the whole thing wobbles for a second. Marcy's eyes flicked to the standing rep, then back to me. "I'll just get right to it," she said. She slid the sheet an inch toward me. "The company is realigning some senior functions, and unfortunately your position is being eliminated as part of that realignment. This is effective immediately. The decision is final and has been reviewed at the leadership level." Reviewed at the leadership level. She meant Trent. She meant one man in a corner office who'd done arithmetic on a napkin and decided I was a line item. "Understood," I said. She blinked. "That's not the word they prepare for. They prepare for tears, or for shouting, or for the desperate bargaining where you list all your wins like a drowning person naming the people who'll miss them. Understood throws the whole choreography off because it's the word of somebody who already has a plan. I want you to know this isn't a reflection of your performance," Marcy added, and I almost laughed because 11 quarters over target and a $31 million deal don't get realigned. They get a bonus, but I let it sit, let her fill the silence. "We'll need your badge," she said. I unclipped it and set it gently on the table between us, right on top of the termination sheet, so she'd have to move my badge to read me my own eulogy. Small thing. I collect small things. "Of course," I said. "Is there anything I need to sign today?" "We'll send the separation paperwork to your personal email," the young rep managed to say. "There's a standard release, 2 weeks severance." 2 weeks, I repeated pleasantly, like he'd told me the weather. "That's generous." And it was, in the sense that it was the exact wrong number to offer somebody they were firing one day before a $4 million bonus vested, but they didn't know that yet. They thought they were being clean, efficient. They thought that by walking me out on Tuesday, they'd zeroed out Wednesday's obligation, and that a 2-week severance and a firm handshake would close the book. What they'd actually just done, the second Marcy said effective immediately, no documented cause, was step directly on the tripwire I'd buried 18 months ago. Firing me a day early didn't cancel the $4 million. It doubled it. And it handed me the one thing I wanted more than money, which was the exclusive right to choose exactly how much this was going to hurt them. But that's a Wednesday problem. On Tuesday, I just smiled, picked up my empty coffee cup because I wasn't going to leave my trash for them, and said, "Well, thank you both. Truly." Then I walked out of Room Denali like I was heading to lunch. Here's what everybody gets wrong about the walk out of the building. They think you go straight down. Elevator, garage, car, cry in the parking structure. That's the exit they've planned for. That's the exit that lets them get back to their day. I didn't go down. I went up. Instead of hitting the button for the lobby, I swiped, no, wait, They'd already killed my badge, hadn't they? Marcy had it. So I stood at the executive elevator and waited for a paralegal I half recognized to badge in, and I stepped in behind her with an armful of folio and a face that said, "I absolutely still work here, and nobody stops a woman in a good blazer who looks like she knows where she's going." I rode up 8 floors to 37. Legal. I'd spent a lot of hours on 37 during the Bergstrom close, papering a deal that had more contingencies than a prenup, and I knew exactly whose office I wanted. Julian Reyes, associate counsel, 4 years out of law school, the kind of sharp that hasn't yet been sanded down by promotions. During Bergstrom, he'd caught a liability clause buried in the vendor's red lines at 11 p.m. that would have cost us millions, and when I'd thanked him, he'd gone red to his ears. Good kid. Terrible poker face. Exactly the person I needed. His door was open. He looked up, saw me, and his whole face did the thing. The widening, the quick math, the "oh no, I heard about this an hour ago, and now she's standing here." Sloan. He half stood. Hey, should you... "Close the door, Julian." He closed the door. "They let me go," I said, sitting down across from him and setting the folio on his desk. 20 minutes ago. Effective immediately, no cause cited, 2 weeks severance, no mention of my incentive package. Marcy handled it. Trent didn't show. Julian sat back down slowly. Sloan, I'm really sorry. I don't need sorry. I need you to read something." I flipped the folio open to page 9 and turned it toward him. Section 14, subsection D. He read it. Then he read it again, slower, the way you read a text message from an ex, and I watched the exact moment it landed. His eyes stopped moving side to side and just focused, like a lens snapping onto a subject. "When did this go in?" he asked quietly. 18 months ago. Contract renegotiation right after my second Q4. I added 4 sentences. Everybody initialed. Trent initialed. He was VP Finance then. He actually asked me what the multiplier language meant, and I told him it was standard transitional protection, and he shrugged and signed it because it was 2 lines above the parking allowance. Julian let out a breath that was almost a laugh but had no humor in it. The parking allowance. Nobody reads past the parking allowance. He tapped the page. "Sloan, do you understand what this is? If they terminated you without documented cause inside 30 days of a vesting event, 1 day before, vests Wednesday, then this doesn't reduce the payout. It accelerates it at 2 times, plus continuation of the vesting schedule. Plus," he ran his finger to the last sentence and stopped. "Plus you elect arbitration or you don't. That's your call, not theirs." "Correct. They think firing you cancels the $4 million. They think firing me is free," I said. "That's the beautiful part. They did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said Tuesday is cheaper than Wednesday, and they were so proud of that little number that nobody flipped to page 9. Julian was quiet for a second. Then, carefully, like a man checking whether the floor will hold his weight. "This clause, was it reviewed? Signed off?" I reached into the folio and pulled out one of the extra pages I'd printed the night before when the cold drop in my stomach first started whispering. Implementation memo, December, Trent's initials, bottom right, and I set down a second page, the equity schedule addendum, approved and signed by the board compensation chair. Section 14 is referenced by name in both. It didn't sneak in. It was ratified. Twice. Julian looked at the 2 pages, then up at me, and I could see him doing a thing I recognized, because I'd done it myself 100 times. He was calculating not just the case, but his place in it. Whether to touch it. Whether it was safe. "I'm not here to make you a weapon, Julian," I said, gentler now. "I'm here because you're the one person on this floor who reads the fine print for love and not for billing hours. I'm going to enforce this whether you help me or not. It's airtight, and I've got copies of everything backed up in 3 places that none of them can reach. But I'd rather the first person inside this company to understand what just happened be somebody with a conscience. So when the number lands upstairs and everybody starts pointing fingers, there's already a record that legal was told the truth, early, by me, in writing." He was quiet. Then he pulled out his phone, photographed page 9, and forwarded himself the 2 supporting pages. His hands were steady now. Who else knows? He asked. You. As of 90 seconds ago, I'm going to tell one more person on this floor, and then I'm going to walk out and go get a coffee that somebody didn't put in my parking spot. And then? I stood, gathered my folio, and looked at him. And then I wait. That's the whole trick, Julian. I don't have to do anything. The clause does it. I just had to make sure the right people found out in the right order. At the door, I paused. One more thing. Don't stick your neck out for me. Stick it out for the fact that they walked a senior executive out the door a day before a vesting event with no documented cause and no legal review. Whatever you think of me, that's a fire, and somebody who saw the smoke and said nothing is going to have a bad year. Be the one who pulled the alarm. I left him staring at the photo on his phone. 2 doors down and 1 corridor over, in a cubicle too small for the amount of institutional memory crammed into it, was Nadia Okafor. I'd mentored Nadia back when she was a summer paralegal who color-coded her tabs and still believed HR existed to protect employees. 5 years later, she knew better, and she'd become the person on 37 who remembered everything. Which contract lived on which drive, who'd signed what, and the fact that my old golden retriever was named Biscuit. She looked up, startled, when I appeared at the mouth of her cubicle. Sloan, I heard, are you okay? What are you? I'm fine. Better than fine, honestly, which I'll explain in about a week. I set a copy of the folio contents on her desk. I need you to hold on to this, and I need you to do exactly nothing with it until Julian Reyes comes to you. Then help him find the December implementation memo in the compliance archive. Original file with the metadata intact. Don't print it, don't email it, just make sure it's exactly where it's supposed to be and that nobody's touched it. She looked at the top page. Section 14, subsection D. Her eyes moved, and then her jaw did the thing Julian's had done, that slow drop of comprehension, except Nadia's came with a grin she tried and failed to swallow. Sloan, she breathed. Did they fire you before? 1 day before, yesterday plus 30 days worth of protection, activated the second Marcy said the word immediately. Oh, this is going to be biblical. Watch the archive, I said. That's all. When they realize what they've done, the very first instinct upstairs is going to be to make a document disappear. Don't let the memo disappear. She was already nodding, and I could see the resolve settle into her shoulders like a rod sliding into place. It won't. I promise you it won't. Good girl. I stood. This is one of those moments that ends up defining you, Nadia. You can pretend you never saw it, or you can be the person who kept the record honest. I already know which one you are. I walked off 37 the same way I'd walked on. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked where my badge was. That's the thing about a quiet exit. Everybody assumes a quiet person is a defeated person. They watched me leave and they thought, there she goes, she took it well. I hadn't taken it at all. I'd planted it. I found out later exactly how the morning went upstairs, because Nadia kept me posted, and because, frankly, people love to tell you about a fire once you're safely outside the building. Let me reconstruct it for you, because it is delicious. By 10:45, Marcy Pell was standing in the People Operations Conference Room, the one with the motivational poster about landing the plane. And she was not landing anything. She was sweating through the silk lining of a blazer that cost more than the severance she'd just offered me. Across from her sat a guy named Devin from HR, the standing rep, who'd typed my termination into the system that morning and was now scrolling frantically through my employee file like it might sprout a justification if he refreshed hard enough. There has to be something, Marcy was saying. A write-up, a verbal coaching note, a performance flag, anything. Devin scrolled some more. Marcy, he said, in the voice of a man realizing the parachute has no cord. She's got 11 quarters over target. Her last review was a 4.9 out of 5. There's not a single disciplinary note. Not one. There's a note from you 3 months ago recommending her for expanded scope. Take that out. I can't take that out. It's time-stamped. Everything is time-stamped. That's the thing about the modern office, that the Marcys of the world never internalize until it's far too late. Every keystroke has a little clock stapled to it, and the clocks don't lie, and you cannot unring a timestamp. Marcy was dialing extensions now, one after another. The way you do when you're hoping the next person will tell you the thing you've done, isn't the thing you've done. Priya, it's Marcy. I need the full email thread on Merrick's contract renegotiation from last year, the whole chain, approvals and all. What do you mean it's in cold storage? Then bring it back from cold storage. I don't care. Today. Meanwhile, 8 floors up, a much quieter and much more dangerous thing was happening. Julian Reyes, bless him, had not gone rogue with my claws. He'd done exactly the right thing, the thing that made him unkillable in the fallout to come. He'd walked it straight up the chain. He'd taken page 9 and the December memo and the comp committee addendum, and he'd put them on the desk of the one person in the building whose job it literally was to worry about this. Regina Hale, general counsel, head of legal, the adult in the room. Regina read page 9. Nadia told me she went the exact color of skim milk. Then she read it a second time, put on her glasses, and read it a third, and by the third read she was already reaching for her phone to clear her afternoon, because Regina Hale had been doing this long enough to recognize a corporate cause of death when she saw one. "Who signed off on the termination?" she asked Julian. "People Ops, Marcy Pell, effective this morning." "Was legal consulted before the termination?" Julian carefully. "I don't believe so." Regina took her glasses off. They walked a C-suite executive out the door, one day before a vesting event, with no documented cause, and without running it past legal. Yes. She was quiet for a second, the specific quiet of a professional watching an avoidable catastrophe finish avoiding being avoided. Then she said the thing that Nadia repeated to me that night, and that I have kept in a small, warm drawer in my heart ever since. "Get me the original contract, the implementation memo, and every signature on the comp addendum, and find out who initialed subsection D, because whoever it was just cost this company several $1,000,000, and I want their name in front of me before the board asks me for it." Nadia, of course, had the archive right where I'd asked her to keep it. Original file, metadata intact, timestamps clean. The first name on subsection D was mine. The third was Trent Kessler's. And by 11:15, while I was sitting in a cafe 4 blocks away, ordering a flat white and watching the whole thing unfold through the internal grapevine, a calendar invite quietly appeared on the assistant screen for the office of the board chair. Subject line, urgent, Merrick separation, section 14 review, priority, highest, organizer, office of the general counsel. The tripwire had been stepped on at 9:04 that morning, right about when I was staring at a cone in my parking spot. It had taken the building roughly 2 hours to feel it go off, and it was going to take them a great deal longer to understand that there was nothing, not a memo, not a settlement, not a single clever man in a corner office, that could put it back. The meeting that afternoon happened in the big conference room on 44, the one with the 80-inch screen and the view of the lake, the room they use for board dinners and for occasions when somebody important needs to be impressed. Nobody was impressed that day. I wasn't there, obviously. But between Nadia's texts, Julian's careful after-the-fact account, and one very talkative VP who owed me a favor, I have been able to assemble the scene in enough detail that I can practically smell the panic sweat. Let me walk you through it. Regina Hale ran it. Trent Kessler sat at the head of the table because he was the CEO and that was his chair, but you could tell from the first 30 seconds that it wasn't his meeting. Marcy Pell sat 2 seats down with a legal pad in front of her on which I'm told she had written the word restructuring 4 times in 4 different sizes, as if the right handwriting might make it true. The CFO, a nervous man named Gill, was there, along with 2 members of the compensation committee who had the specific hunted look of people beginning to suspect their signatures were about to be read aloud. Regina didn't sit. She dropped a stack of paper on the table, the contract, the memo, the addendum, and she let it land with a slap. "I'm going to say this once, plainly, so there's no confusion later about who knew what and when," she said. "This is not a communications problem. This is not an HR misstep we smooth over with a press-friendly sentence. This is a self-inflicted 8-figure liability, and we pulled the pin on it ourselves this morning at 9:04. Trent leaned back, doing the confident thing, the thing that had gotten him the corner office in the first place. "Regina, come on. Sloane's dramatic. We all know that. She's making noise. She's got no cause of action. We eliminated a role. Companies do it every day. She has more than a cause of action, Regina said. She has a triggered contractual clause that you personally initialed, that the board's compensation committee ratified, that references her by name, and that entitles her to double her bonus the instant we terminated her without documented cause inside a 30-day vesting window, which we did, this morning, without consulting legal. She pulled a single page free and slid it down the table to Trent. Page 9, bottom third. Your initials are in the right margin. Read subsection D out loud, Trent. I'd like everyone to hear it in your voice. He didn't read it out loud. He read it silently, and I'm told his jaw did a small, involuntary thing, a drop of maybe half a centimeter, the physical tell of a man watching a decision he was proud of turn into a decision that will follow him to other companies. This says 2 times, he said finally. 2 times the affected amount, Regina confirmed. The affected amount is her $4 million Bergstrom bonus. So the bonus we fired her to avoid paying is now $8 million, plus continuation of her remaining vesting schedule, which Gil is going to price out for us in a moment, and which he already looks ill about. Plus, and this is the part I want the room to really sit with, the clause gives her, not us, the sole right to elect arbitration or waive it. Which means if she decides she'd rather have this play out in open court where everything is public, she can, and we can't stop her. The room went the particular kind of quiet that has a texture to it. Marcy stopped writing, restructuring. When did this clause go in? One of the comp committee members asked, in the voice of a man who already suspected he knew. Regina tapped the addendum. It was added during her renegotiation 18 months ago and formally ratified in the December implementation memo, referenced by section number in the equity addendum that this committee, she looked at the 2 men, approved and signed. So before anyone reaches for the story that this was buried or slipped in or that she pulled a fast one, no. It was disclosed, referenced by name, and initialed by everyone at this table who was in a position to initial anything 18 months ago. Including you, Trent. Nobody reads that far into a contract, Trent said, and even he could hear how it sounded coming out of his mouth. She reads that far, Regina said. That was apparently the entire point. Gil, the CFO, cleared his throat because it was his turn to make the day worse. I ran the numbers during the break, he said, not looking up from his tablet. With the doubled bonus, the vesting continuation, and the standard indemnity provisions if she contests, we're looking at a floor of $8.2 million. That's the floor. If she elects arbitration and pushes on bad faith damages, given that there's no documented cause and no legal review, he trailed off. Give me the ceiling, Gil, Trent said. I'd rather not put a ceiling in the room, legally, Regina cut in smoothly. But the honest answer is that the ceiling is whatever an arbitrator thinks a company deserves for firing its top performer one day before her bonus to save $4 million and instead spending twice that. Which is not a number that tends to be kind to employers. Trent turned to Marcy. You told me this was clean. You told me we eliminate the role. We're out for 2 weeks severance. Done. And here's where it got good, because Marcy, cornered, did the thing cornered people always do. She reached for the nearest higher branch. I was told the timing was fine, she said. I was told leadership had signed off. I ran the termination I was instructed to run. Instructed by whom? Regina asked very quietly, and every head in the room turned toward the head of the table, where Trent Kessler sat with his half-centimeter jaw and his initialed page, and absolutely nowhere to put his hands. Nobody answered that question out loud. They didn't have to. The answer was already circulating on 37, where Nadia had, at my request, made very sure the December memo stayed exactly where it lived, with Trent's initials right there in the corner where the arithmetic had been done. Regina picked her papers back up. Here's where we are. We do not settle in a panic, because a panicked settlement reads as an admission and the number only goes up. We do not stall, because she can escalate to the board any time she likes, and the board is going to have questions about why their general counsel wasn't consulted before a C-suite termination. And we absolutely do not, under any circumstances, touch a single document in her employment file, because if there's one thing I'd bet my license on, it's that a woman who wrote herself a clause like this has version control on everything and a way to know the instant we edit anything. She was right about that, by the way. but we'll get to it. So what do we do? The CFO asked. Regina looked around the table, at Trent, at Marcy, at the 2 comp committee men who'd signed the thing that was now eating them alive. And she said the truest sentence anybody said in that building all day. We wait for her to tell us what she wants, and we pray it's only money. She didn't have to wait long, because at that point the board got involved, and when the board gets involved, they don't send a memo. They call. I was on the little roof deck of my building that evening, barefoot, a glass of something crisp sweating on the railing beside me, watching the light go orange over the city, and feeling, for the first time in about 3 years, genuinely, uncomplicatedly relaxed. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't have saved, but a number I recognized the shape of, if that makes sense. That particular flavor of important that only comes from the top of the org chart. I let it ring twice. Then I answered, calm as still water. Sloan Merrick. Sloan, it's Curtis and Becky. A pause. From the board. I smiled at the skyline. Curtis and Becky had, about 2 years earlier, quietly floated the idea of me taking a role at a company he was also invested in. Discreet, flattering, with enough zeros to make me think about it for a full weekend before I said no. He'd always had a good nose for where the actual competence lived in an organization, as opposed to where the titles lived, which is exactly why he was the one calling instead of Trent. Curtis, I said warmly, to what do I owe the pleasure? I think you know. A dry sound, not quite a laugh. I've spent the last 2 hours reading a clause, Section 14, subsection D, along with a December memo and a comp addendum. And I have to tell you, in 26 years of sitting on boards, it's one of the cleanest pieces of self-protection I have ever seen drafted into an incentive package. So I have exactly one question for you, and I'd appreciate a straight answer. Did you engineer this? Did you set us up to fire you? No, I said, and I meant it. I didn't set anybody up, Curtis. I wrote a clause 18 months ago that says, in plain English, that if this company ever tried to fire me a day before my bonus to avoid paying it, it would cost them double. And then this morning, somebody at this company decided to fire me a day before my bonus to avoid paying it. I didn't set the trap. I just told everyone, in writing, exactly where it was, and they stepped on it anyway. There was a long silence on the line. The good kind. The kind where the other person is recalculating who they're talking to. Trent's still calling it an oversight, Curtis said. Trent asked me what the multiplier meant when he initialed it, I said. I told him. He signed. It's in the memo. And Marcy signed the implementation notice in December. I flagged the language for her in that thread, underlined it, and her acknowledgement is time-stamped. So it's not an oversight. It's a decision that everyone at that table participated in 18 months ago and forgot about because reading is hard. I heard, faintly, another voice in the background on his end. Muffled, urgent, somebody handing Curtis a piece of paper. Then Curtis came back and his tone had changed, gone from probing to something closer to resigned. Our CFO just walked in with the recalculation, he said. With the vesting continuation and the indemnity floor, he's got you at $8.4 million. He says it goes higher if you contest. I'm aware of the number, Curtis. I wrote the formula. Another pause. You haven't asked for anything. That's what's got everyone upstairs paralyzed. No demand letter, no lawyer on the phone, no counter offer. Regina keeps waiting for your opening move and there isn't one. Why? I picked up my glass and watched a plane cross the orange sky, slow and certain, heading somewhere better. Because I don't have an opening move, Curtis. That's what none of them understand yet. I already made all my moves. I made them 18 months ago at my kitchen table, with a fever, 1 sentence at a time. There's nothing left for me to do. The clause does everything. All I have to do is exist, quietly, 4 blocks away, and let your own signatures work for me for once. You want to settle? You can offer? You want arbitration? That's my call, not yours, and I haven't decided if I'm in a public mood. You want to fight it in court? Read the file first, then decide if you really want to. They'll want to negotiate you down, he said. They can want that. The clause says double. Double isn't a negotiation. Double is a number I wrote and everyone at that table initialed. Curtis exhaled, long and slow. You know, he said, I always read you as too composed for this business, too calm. I used to think it was a lack of appetite. Watching this today, I realize I had it backwards. You weren't calm because you had no fire. You were calm because you already knew where every wire was buried. That's why they hired me, I said. It's a shame nobody remembered why before they fired me. The line went quiet. Then, almost gently, I assume you'll be lawyering up soon. I already did, I said. 18 months ago. I lawyered up against my own company, and I did it in advance, and the lawyer was me, and I did the whole thing in a fever with a box of tissues. Good night, Curtis. I hung up. I didn't smirk. I didn't punch the air. I just set the phone face down on the railing, picked up my glass, and watched the last of the orange drain out of the sky, and I felt something that was better than triumph, which was quiet. The $8 million was never really the point. The point was that they'd built the whole revenue engine of that company on my back, and they genuinely believed they could kick the chair out from under themselves without anybody getting hurt. I wasn't angry about it. Angry is loud. I was just precise, and precise always finds the target eventually. The settlement email came in 9 days later. I was in Seattle by then, in a hotel room with a view of the water, and a robe that cost more than my first month's rent out of college, and my phone chimed softly while I was watching a ferry crawl across the Sound. Subject line, Merrick separation, final settlement, confidential. Attachment, a PDF I opened while standing at the window. Total, $8,412,000 and no cents, because apparently even a doubled bonus gets rounded to something that fits neatly in a wire transfer field. There was an NDA attached, requesting my signature within 5 business days. No public disclosure without express board consent. I read the number. I did not read the NDA, because I hadn't decided yet whether I felt like being quiet, and a woman who holds the sole right to elect arbitration does not sign the first NDA that slides under her door just because it's polite. But that's a conversation for the lawyers. The number was real, the money was real, and the damage was already done, and there was no press release in the world that could undo it. They never did manage to spin it, by the way. No new strategic direction announcement, no LinkedIn post about difficult but necessary changes, just a very quiet reshuffle that everyone inside the building understood perfectly. Marcy Pell was gone within the month. Pursuing new opportunities, the internal note said, which is corporate for a mercy killing. She'd run the termination she was told to run, and when the number came due, the people who told her to run it needed someone standing between them and the board, and Marcy was standing closest. Trent Kessler kept his title, technically. I heard he was moving into a strategic advisory capacity focused on long-term innovation initiatives, which is a very expensive collection of words that means his corner office got reassigned, and his new department had no budget, no reports, and no reason to exist. One of my old reps sent me a photo, a couple of weeks later, of Trent's new badge. It read, Senior Advisor, Enterprise Alignment. Nobody knew what that meant, which was, of course, the entire point of it. Exile with a nameplate. I didn't return any of the calls, not Marcy's, not Regina's. Regina, to her credit, sent a short and dignified note that I actually respected, one professional to another, which I read twice and did not reply to. Not even Curtis's follow-up, where he offered very casually to connect me with some boards that could use exactly your kind of eye. I didn't need Curtis's boards. I already had their signatures, and I was busy, because it turns out that when word gets around that a chief revenue officer sank a CEO's little $4 million shortcut into an $8 million crater using nothing but 4 sentences she wrote herself, other companies find that extremely interesting. Kestrel Partners flew me out to Seattle not to interview me for a job, but to offer me a seat at their table. Partner track, strategy, real equity, the kind with a pen next to it, not just a signature line at the bottom of somebody else's document. But that night wasn't about the next thing. That night was about punctuation. I sat down on the little balcony with my glass and I scrolled back through my phone until I found a number I'd saved and never deleted. The board chair at Halden Cloud, a woman named Eleanor Grady, who'd signed the original comp addendum 3 years earlier, back when I first wrote the clause, and she'd waved it through because she trusted me and because, she'd said at the time, "You've never once cost this company $1 it didn't make back tenfold." She'd been right, right up until the end, when the company cost itself the dollars by trying not to pay me. I typed one line, Section 14, subsection D, final sentence, and then I attached a photo, just my bare feet on the warm balcony tile, the glass of wine sweating beside them, and behind it the city and the water lit up gold, all of it looking like a very expensive apology. No caption, no emoji, nothing else. Because the final sentence of subsection D, the one I'd added last at 3 a.m. after the fever had broken and the lawyer in me was feeling poetic, read like this: failure to honor the terms herein shall be deemed not a clerical error, but a deliberate failure of stewardship, subject to full restitution, review, and such reputational consequence as follows naturally therefrom. Reputational consequence as follows naturally therefrom. Everyone at that table had initialed those words. Trent had actually chuckled when he read them, I remembered, and said something about lawyers loving to be dramatic. And now, $8.4 million later, the reputational consequence was following, quite naturally, therefrom. I hit send. I watched the little check mark turn to delivered, and then I put the phone down, picked up my glass, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel like I was bracing for anything. I didn't burn the bridge. Let's be clear about that. I didn't need to. I'd read the deed to the bridge 18 months in advance, in a fever, at my kitchen table, and when they tried to shove me off it, I simply stepped aside, sold the land underneath it, and left them standing on a structure they no longer owned, holding a bill for the ashes. Somebody once told me to be so good they couldn't ignore me. They noticed me all right, just about a day too late. So, if you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you, truly. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so the next one finds you. Drop a like if you enjoyed watching a corner office learn to read, and tell me down in the comments. If you'd been Sloan, would you have signed their NDA and stayed quiet for the $8 million? Or would you have elected arbitration and let the whole thing play out in the open? I genuinely want to know. I'll see you in the next one.